Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Megan. I'm so glad that you're here. Today, we are painting two really fun, curious ducks for our spring inspiration for this month. I'm really excited. Painting animals is always so much fun because these animals always have their own personalities. And we'll do a little bit of sketching and drawing to kind of ground our shapes, ground our positioning. But I'll go through our supplies here. But welcome to you. A few of the supplies that you'll need for our class today is a range of brushes. I'm painting with acrylic paints today. I'll go over the colors in just a minute, but I have some just really basic acrylic craft paints, craft brushes, and you can use anything you really have on hand. Just have a range of small to medium sizes that will give you a little bit of flexibility to figure out what brush to use where. So I will tell you, along the way, what size brushes I'm using and where, but really just always just do your best and don't stress too much. We're here to have a good time. Okay. So I have some brushes here ready to go. I am using acrylic craft paint. You don't need fancy paint. You can just use basic paint. I have a range of colors. I always have the primaries in front of me, which is blue, red, and yellow. And then I also have black and white to control the tint and the shade and the hue in itself. So I always have those. If you happen to have one of those fancy, 12 to 24 paint colored sets, you can use your purples and your greens and all that too if you want. And the colors that we'll be using in today's inspirations is, we'll definitely be using white and blue for the duck and orange, but we have some purples and some oranges and yellow. So we'll have a kind of a fun, colorful background that will kind of do abstract around the ducks after, which will be kind of fun. And you can play with your textured approach to the look and the feel of these ducks. In the inspiration, it's textured. It looks, like maybe it was painted with an oil per se, but we'll have some fun with shading and bringing these ducks to life. So I have a range of brushes. I have some paints, and I have a few other things. I have a paper towel for any messes. So I always grab one of those select a sheet paper towels to use. I'm painting on 11 by 14 canvas paper today here in my studio. I love this canvas paper because I can put it in a frame easily if I love it. And then I have something to mix my colors on. I've been using palette paper, which is kind of like a wax style paper. So I can put my paints right on here and mix, which is really nice. And then I can just throw the sheet away. So if you ever have any questions about what products to use or what your options are, you're always welcome to reach out to me if you have questions. And then I have a cup of water to rinse your brushes. Okay. Any other bonus supplies that I have today that I'll be using is a little bit of a pencil for sketching some of the ducks. So in the scene today, you get to determine how big you want your ducks to be. If you want to paint one duck or two ducks or three ducks, maybe you want to paint a family of ducks. You can make those choices. I'm just going to paint two ducks today. And the ducks are going to be fairly large in scale. So this is, top of my canvas is up here, bottom of my canvas is down here. The bottom of my duck feet are, if I show you the bottom here, they'll be up off the ground. So I'll have a little bit of padding around my ducks. I'm not going to put the feet all the way down at the bottom. I'll start the feet here, and I'll use shading down here to create a base or a more firmness for the bottom. But this is where you get to decide as an artist, and we'll start with our pencil on how big you want your ducks to be. So for me, I'm going to do two ducks, and the body positioning is going to be a little bit different for each of the ducks. One duck's going to be bent down a little bit. So this duck on the left for me is going to be a little shorter, and the duck for me on the right is going to be a little taller. So you can pick whatever duck you want to start with, but it's always good to kind of find where you want the top of the head to be. So for me, I know my taller duck is going to be over here, and I'm going to make the body is going to kind of come over here to the right. So I could even make a little mark for where I want its butt to come over to. So I put a little pencil mark right here. And maybe I do a little bit of a pencil mark for the other side of the body. So I have two pencil marks here. Whenever you use a pencil, just try to go nice and slow. And one of the things you could do is you could kind of create the rounded part of the body here, and you could come up and do the head and the neck this way. Now I'll bring this down a little bit so you can see it. I will push down a little harder too, but this is where you can kind of figure out where you want the top of the head to be. So the top of the duck's head, it's narrow, but it kind of comes out a little bit, kind of where the duck's jaw is. See that? And then the duck's neck is actually on like the left side of its body. So it's going to come down, and then its butt and its tail feathers are going to be over here. So you can see kind of have a rounded, narrow head. It kind of comes out where the duck's jaw is. And go as light as you can with your pencil, because then you don't have to worry about erasing it. And since I'm pushing down a little harder now, I'll pull it back a little bit. But this is where you can play. Maybe the duck's neck will be a little bit longer. Maybe. But play with your lines, play with your shapes. It's okay to erase. This side of the body comes out, but it comes back in. And you can kind of round the bottom of the body, kind of like a vase. And then the right side, it's going to kick out a little bit, but then it's going to kind of round down like the bottom of a vase. So you can play with how wider this part of the body is. There is a wing on the top side of the bird here, so there's kind of a 1-2. But you can play with this butt area a little bit. Make a line, erase it. Make sure your neck is long enough. Ducks have a lot of muscles in their necks. Right? And I'm kind of erasing my lines as I go, just to kind of be in control over what my final lines are. So just take your time here to do a little bit of sketching. If you wanted to do a little bit of sketching for the legs too, you could. So the legs are kind of on the outside of the body. And they're kind of like pencils. Maybe they're a little wider up top. And then they kind of web out and down. The right side of the leg here kind of comes straight down and comes out to the right a little bit. But you can kind of add like a triangle kind of webbed foot in here. You can play with the positioning of the legs. This duck's a little wonky. His leg's a little wobbly here. So the other leg is on like the right side of the body. And you can play with the perspective of the feet. Kind of just giving it a 1, 2, 3. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. So ducks have really kind of muscular bodies, wider bodies, see that? And then they have these necks that are, they're narrow. Once you get past this jawline, they come down narrow, and then they come down, and you can come out a little bit, and then into a muscular neck, into a body. And the beak will be right in this space. So if you wanted to take a minute to kind of draw in a little bit of a V for like these nostrils, and then a rounded kind of duck beak or bill, you can. You want to make sure you have enough white space up here, so you can play with the lines. The duck will be white and gray and blue in color. The beak needs to come up a little higher for me. It's kind of a little bit more narrow near like the bridge of the nose per se. So if yours was initially wide like mine, kind of where there's kind of an M up here. I brought it in a little bit more narrow towards its nose and nostrils. And if it's helpful for you to draw kind of two little beady eyes, just to get the face in, you can. Maybe that will help you with the duck's bill. Okay, so our duck is coming to life. So magical. All right. So you can see I have a little wing kind of here, and then it just kind of comes out to a fluffy butt over here on the right side. So play with these lines. We are going to do like a soft erase. Well, I'm going to do a soft erase at least. I just made his butt a little bigger. Okay, so there's one duck. Take your time if you need more time there. I'm going to do my second duck next. I am going to hold a little bit of space. See how there's a little space over here on the right side of this duck? I'm going to hold the same amount of space over here. So I'm just going to put a little mark saying, hey, Megan, don't go any higher than that. And the second duck for me, his head is a little lower. So I'm going to put the second duck's head here. And I'm just going to kind of round the top of the head, just to kind of give myself a little structure here on a place to get started. So you could start with the head if you wanted, because that might help you with placement. And then their bodies can touch here. That's totally fine. And then this duck is, his body, his neck's a little shorter here because he's kind of leaning in. And you can play with, this is the duck's chest. So this is going to kind of come in and come out. It's going to have a rounded little leg, little chest coming up. We'll add the leg in here. Right? You see what I'm doing here? This is kind of the front chest of the bird. And then on the back side of the neck, you can do like a little rounded wing coming down. Again, think muscular. And then you can kind of come down to a second tier and just give it a rounded butt. Okay, not too bad. And then the body might continue down a little bit, and you can kind of create that second leg here. So there's a wider connection to the top of the leg to the body, and then it just gets narrow. And then you can play with those webbed feet. Some of these we're doing, you know, kind of a three-pointed foot. So it's a 1, 2, 3 for a webbed foot. This needs to be a little bigger. So pay attention to how big your feet are. Pay attention to how wide your duck is. And the reason we're doing some of this sketching up front is because we're gonna paint the background. We could have painted the background first. It's just, if you've taken these classes before, you know that there's always lots of ways of doing things. And I thought it was important for us to kind of get our ducks down first, because we can paint around from an abstract perspective. We can kind of paint around our ducks. And then I'm just going to do some kind of fun webbed feet. This foot's going to be kind of back. This one's going to be to the front. This one's going to be to the side. So let's just do this. You can play with the positioning of your feet. And we'll use some shading. To create kind of what these webbed feet look like. So I'm just going through erasing any extra lines that I don't need. Drawing is sometimes a part of painting, the painting process. It depends on your preference as an artist, if you wanted to sketch something first or not, to kind of get your ideas out. A lot of artists do that. I'm going to come in and I'm going to just be mindful of the placement of this second beak on this duck. So you can kind of do an M-like shape. Again, I'm doing a little bit more narrow, kind of coming out for the beak. Trying to do a little bit more narrow. I didn't do a very good job of that. And it's a little bit rounded too. This one had it kind of goes straight across a little bit. So you can play with the differences if you wanted to. Looks like this needs to be a little bit more narrow. My beacon itself is a little bit too wide. And this is fairly rounded here. So you can play with the shape of your bill. That's why it's sometimes better to do it with a pencil because you can erase it as you go. With paint, it's more permanent, right? You can easily cover something up with paint, but sometimes it's good to play with the basic lines first. And the duck's eyes are kind of on the outside of the head. They're kind of like little seed size. And you can see this beak over here, this bill is too wide for me. So I need to come in a little bit here. I think that's what my problem is. Not sure yet. Maybe it's out and it comes in. So this is where you can kind of use your eye to figure out the shaping of your bill. This one over here came out nice. It's a little wider, kind of 3/4 of the way down. So if I come down, there we go. And then round tone down, come down more narrow towards the end. That seems to help a little bit. So you can play with that a little bit. And having a little bit of like the white spacing around it. So just take a few minutes to just sketch and draw these details as you see fit. It's okay to make changes. Yeah, I feel like having it more narrow towards the top is definitely a good thing. There, that's helpful. All right. And being sure that the neck does have some narrow parts is important too. All right, terrific. So at any point during this class, you need to slow down, you need to speed up, just always take your time and kind of go at your own speed in that regard. So you can pause the video anytime that you need to. Just making this beak a little longer. So with pencil, it's nice. You can kind of make changes as you go. All right, cool. So I'm going to let my ducks just sit here for right now. They look great. I love them. They're going to be a lot of fun to paint. We're going to paint the background next, and then we'll paint our ducks. So the background, when you're ready, feel free to join me. If you're still sketching, no problem. The background is lots of beautiful colors. So the colors that I see in the inspiration are like purples and teals and like yellows. And then it's going to be a little more shaded on the bottom. So I love the idea of using purple. We don't use purple a ton in this class, in these classes. I don't know why we should use it more, but we use it more as like accented colors and not like a ton of purples. But I'm going to go ahead and mix some purples with you. To make purple from scratch, if you don't have purple, is blue and red mixed together. And you're going to need a little bit of white to kind of soften it. And you can make it like a purplish pink. You could do like a true blue kind of red purple. You can decide. But I'm just doing a small dollop of red and a small dollop of blue. And I'm going to put a little bit of white nearby, maybe up here at the top, just to be able to grab from it if I need it to lighten things up a bit. And then I'm going to grab one of the bigger brushes I have. I usually use these 1/2-inch flat tip brushes or 1/2-inch round tip brushes for these classes. They are fine for coverage and for me typically. Pick one of these. If you wanted to use a bigger brush, like go for it, you can. Like if you wanted to use like an inch flat tip, you could. So I'll use a smaller brush because I tend to paint a little faster than some other folks. So if you wanted to use a bigger brush like this, you could. I may use it to play and blend colors after, but no big deal there. Okay, so I'm getting my brush a little bit wet and I'm going to make purple. So I like leaving a little space in between these two colors so I can kind of bring the blue down and bring up the red. And then I like mixing the purple in between. The reason this technique works for me is because if I need to add a little bit more red, I can easily bring in a little bit more red. If I need to bring in a little bit more blue, I can easily bring in a little bit more blue. And this may look like black on the dark color on the video, but this is like a nice dark plum purple in person, which is perfect. And then I'll do a couple brush strokes over here. This is like a plum purple in this space. I'm going to take a little bit of the white and lighten it. So you can see that this is a purple color. And I'm kind of bringing this purple over, and it'll allow me to find a color purple that I want to use for this class today. Now I'm inspired to bring in a little bit more red. And this is where you can be playful, finding colors that you like. It's kind of turning to be like a little bit of a mauve. That's okay. Maybe I'll use a little bit of mauve. This is a nice color. And for me, I'm going to do a little bit of purple, a little bit of teal, a little bit of yellow. So for me, I'm going to just kind of follow my intuition on how I want to paint the background. You can paint it any way that you want. So I am just going to kind of be playful here. So you don't have to do like lines like I am. I'm probably going to put a little water on my brush. Any way you want to fill this background, feel free. I may just paint all around these ducks, using a little water. Because I can always put teal and yellow on top. So follow your intuition on how you want to paint the background today. My ducks are going to be white and blue. I'll bring in a little teal, as I mentioned. But they're going to stand out on this color, which will be really nice. So you can make your background as dark or as light as you want. So your choice today. The darker you make your background, the more your ducks will stand out. But I will be adding some yellow here as well. So I'll have a little bit of like a lighter yellow pop. At least I think I am. So I'm just being polite and painting around my ducks. And I'm doing all like vertical brush strokes right now. So anyway, you want to fill this in. I'm going to add a lot more kind of, be adding a second coat in the background. So if you see lots of brush strokes, don't worry. Just have a little patience. Oh no, I got purple on my duck. Purple and orange and blue and yellow, they're all really quite complementary to one another, which is quite nice. I am dipping my brush in a little bit of water to kind of creating a little bit of lightness here and there. If you get onto some of your pencil, don't worry. That's why we're going to paint the ducks after. And for me, I'm doing purple everywhere. You don't have to. You could do multiple colors right now if you wanted to. I'm just following my intuition as an artist, which is just what I encourage you to do too. So sometimes it could be scary for some, but just this is a great way to kind of practice in a low risk environment, just to kind of think about what you want to do. Kind of allows you to branch out a little bit, be a little less scared about what the outcome may be. And I'm using this big brush, but I'm kind of turning it on its side. See that for more narrow brush strokes? You can take your big brush and you can turn it one way or another. When you paint, believe it or not, you don't need a ton of different brushes. The more you practice when you paint, the more versatile and flexible you'll get with regards to how to use any given brush. Obviously, certain brushes will do certain things, but there's a lot of flexibility with kind of manipulating the use of a given brush. And you you get to know that and you become a little bit more familiar with that flexibility the more you paint. Just nice. And I love this purple so far. I don't use purple that often, and it's fun to kind of do something a little different here. Purple's such a great spring color as well. So if you're a blue person and you wanted to do blue, you could have done blue. You could do green, doesn't matter. Any background color. And if you wanted to add and change your background, you could easily paint over this purple. So, or whatever you're doing, you can easily paint over it. So just kind of follow your gut. Don't worry about it too much. You can see I'm just trying to create a little consistency here with my colors and my brush strokes. I'm just doing some nice smoothing brush strokes. And I'm still maintaining that vertical as much as possible. If you happen to get a little bit of this color in your ducks, don't worry. And I'm using a little bit of water. I'm gonna softly dance around these ducks. Just take your time. I decided to paint the entire background. I came into the class today not knowing what I really wanted to do for the background, and it's okay. You don't always need a plan. You don't always need to know exactly what you're going to do when you start painting. You can start with an idea. You can start with a concept, right? But you don't need to jump in with knowing every little bit you're doing. And if you're taking a class with me, I'll always talk through that. I'll always give you different ideas as you jump in to kind of get your creativity going in that regard. I'm just outlining this duck to say, hey, Megan, let's keep our ducks white. If you didn't want to do white ducks today, you could do a different color inside of these ducks. That's totally fine too. And I'm not going to put any teal in here yet, because if I put teal in with purple, it's going to get mucky and brown. So I'm going to let the purple dry before I put any other colors in. And you can see I have some like darker purples over here. I'm not worried about that. I can even add some more darker colors over here just to kind of make it match. And I'm just doing those long, smooth brush strokes. You can kind of keep working the paint in. You can use a soft hand or a firm hand to kind of play with how the brush strokes are applied to the canvas. Kind of a soft brush stroke hand can help kind of manipulate the scene a little bit. Now I'm just going to come in and just be a little playful with some of these darker areas. Clean off my brush. I brought in a little bit of white. I'm just softening some of these darker spaces just because. Now your background is going to evolve, especially if you're going to bring in multiple colors like I am. So give this a minute to dry. If you're interested while this is drying to like we can make an orange and we could like paint the duck's feet and the beak, that's totally fine for us to do right now. If you want your background to dry. So let's do that. It's okay to bounce around as an artist, especially if you need a space to dry and you need to come back to it in a little bit. There's other like productive areas that you can work on your canvas. Just know it's okay to switch around. I did that in my classes, but I don't always talk through why we do things like that. But the feet is something that we could do at any time. And I just grabbed a smaller brush and a little yellow and a little bit of red will make an orange. So you can decide how juicy this orange is. The more red you add, the more bold it would be per se. And you can just start with any kind of color orange. We'll be adding a darker and a lighter shade to this, but it's okay to start wherever you're at. But the legs are orange, so you can kind of come in and we're going to do 2 coats of orange for these legs. But it's good to just get this process started. The legs and the feet are orange. There will be like a lighter orange that will kind of tuck in on top for some highlighting. You can go as simple or as complex with regards to the detail that we do today. I'll always share different tips and techniques with you, but everyone has different levels of comfort with painting. So just know that I will never push you to do one thing or another. I'll always allow you to kind of make those choices in our classes. But I hope you're loving this so far. It's so fun. Here's one little foot. And we'll do a little bit of outlining potentially. If we need to cover up any of the orange with like white feathers, we can. But we're letting our background dry and we're just getting in some of these, the orange feet-like detail. The webbed feet. My pencil is covering up pretty well here, but look around your canvas. If you see pencil anywhere, you can go in and do a soft erase, especially on the body area if you need to. My purple covered up a lot of the edges for my duck. So I'm going to do the same color. I'm going to mix a little bit more paint. And if you want it to be fancy and kind of bring in 2 tones of color as you fill in your duck's feet, you can. If you want to do a little bit of a darker orange on the outside or on the top of the feet, you can. We'll do a little bit more depth work, but you can see a little bit of dark orange on one side of the leg. I'm just mixing a new color, so I got a darker tone, but I'm just going to paint these in. So it's okay to bring in like lighter and darker colors as you paint. A lot of artists do that. Sometimes beginners don't do that because you don't really know what to do or how to do it. So I typically do any depth work as a second step because we have a lot of beginners in these classes. But the more you paint, you can do depth work along the way. So depth work is when you bring in a lighter color or a darker color to kind of create shading or highlighted areas on any given object. So for these feet, there's a lighter yellow or lighter orange that could be brought in to add depth or highlighting. And that's, again, you could do it on your own as you go, or you could do it as a second step after. We'll do it as a second step after. So we just get the basic orange in. But if you wanted to try bringing in a little bit of lighter and darker colors, you could. So everyone has their own levels of comfort with doing that. I'm not going to do too much of it right now because I just want to take it nice and slow with you today to get these basic background objects filled in. And we'll let these dry and then we'll do our depth work on these feet after. Okay, our little ducks are coming to life. The beaks, you can have the beaks a little like more yellow if you wanted to. So you can see I just brought in a little bit more yellow here. Just make sure you're happy with the brush you're using. I want you to kind of make sure you stay within the lines here as you fill in your beak. So this is a little bit more of a yellowy orange. And if you kind of go outside the lines, don't worry. That's why we're going to do we'll do white paint after for any touch-ups. But see how it's a little more yellowy than down here? This is more of an orange. This is a little more of a yellowy orange. So that's optional. You can make a choice if that's something you wanted to do or not. I made a choice as an artist to make it a little more yellowy in the beak, even though it's still very orange. I can see my pencil marks, so I'll probably have to come in. I should have erased some of the beak a little bit because I had strong pencil lines so you could see them. I could leave it. I could do a second coat. It doesn't matter. Okay. I may take a little bit of this yellowy orange and just put it on the left side of his body here, just for like a little bit of a glow. Just a little bit here and maybe a little bit on the back side of the leg. Maybe I'll put a little water on my brush. I have a lot of paint on my brush. Maybe a little bit here on the back side, just a little bit of a glow here. I'll do a little bit on this guy's butt over here. We're adding a little warmth to our ducks. Now I'm going to put a small dot of black on my plate. Whoa, that is a lot of black paint. You don't need that much black paint. I'm going to do 2 little black eyes. If you wanted to do like dark purple eyes, you could do dark purple eyes. You don't have to use black if you don't want to. But the eyes will bring your characters to life immediately. So you can maybe start small with these dots. If you have pencil lines, they can erase. So you can erase the pencil. And I did smaller eyes for this guy, which I actually like. You can always change the size of the black dots, but sometimes it helps us get in some of those details. You can also, once you get these beaks painted, you can reshape the beaks with some white paint too. So sometimes it's nice to kind of just get going with some of these features. All right. So I'm just going to let my eyes dry. I'm going to let the beaks and the oranges dry. Our cute little ducks are coming to life. And then you can think about what else you might want to do for the background. In the inspiration, it's very abstract and textured in a way where there's like a lot going on. So I want you to think about what you want to play with at this point. I am going to make a teal, and I'm going to add a little bit of like teal around the ducks. I may do a little bit of texturizing with like the corner of a paper towel. I'm not really sure yet. I'm just going to kind of go with the flow. Anything I don't like personally, I'm just going to paint over. So I think it's an important part for the background for you to think about, do you want it to be a solid color or do you want it to be funky, really? One of the things that I know that I do want is I wanted to make the bottom a little bit more shaded. So I could just start with the shading at the bottom and kind of let the top part evolve. That's kind of a safe thing for us to do with the background right now. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to grab my big brush. And I know that I want it to be like a darker purple down here. So I'm just going to come back to my purples. I have a darker purple right here. So I know that I want it to be more shaded by the duck's feet. So I can come in and you can be as abstract or as like smooth and silky as you wish with where you kind of want your ground to start. So look, I'm creating shading underneath. And you could just do simple little brush strokes like I am. Like that's totally fine. I'm coming up to the duck's ankles a little bit. And you could just use a little water on your brush to kind of help blend it in. You don't always have to use thick and heavy paint. So while this is wet, I'm just going to come in and kind of blend in this light purple, sorry, this darker purple with a little water. With acrylic, you kind of have to move quickly. See how I'm blending this in with a little bit of water? And it's kind of taking that darker purple and it's kind of just blending it into the bottom, which for me, I really like. See how it just grounded, immediately grounded the whole bottom of the picture. That was important to me. If you wanted to have your ducks outside or in a certain scene, that's fine. You can kind of pick and choose what you want to do there. So for me, I like that. It's working for me. All right. Then I can figure out, well, what else do I want to add in where? I know that I want to add in a little bit of shading over here by this duck, his bottom over here. So for me, I'm going to take a little bit of this dark purple again. Maybe I'll mix a little bit of water with it. Kind of along the top side of the wing here. And around the bottom side. It's going to create a little bit of shading over here on this side. And I'm using a really light hand to kind of just blend it in. Just adding a little bit there. I can always, and maybe between the legs, it's a little more shaded. I can paint over some of this to blend it in anymore. That's no big deal. But maybe in between the legs, it's a little more shaded. So you can play with what you want to use for colors here. See what's a little more shaded there. I might just do a little bit of a line of a dark purple just on the outside of this body. Like there's a little bit of a shade on the left side of this duck. On the right, see that? Just added a little bit of a shade line there. And I could do the same thing on the inside of this left leg, adding a little bit of shade. So you can see it just kind of, it's allowing the ducks just to kind of stand out a little bit, which is kind of nice. And I'm using my water, my brush has quite a bit of water on it. Not quite a bit. It is wet, it's not dripping, but it has the paint pigment on it. So I'm kind of using that to kind of help blend in how this dark purple is kind of just playing with my shades. Okay, you can see that there. And you can play with, again, this is art, so you can be artistic, you can be creative around like how one color kind of blends into another. So I went and I grabbed some of this purple again, and I'm kind of blending that into this darker color. So the transition was a little bit more fluid. See what I did there? But you can see how the shading really is just allowing the ducks to kind of jump off the picture. All right, so I think I'm good with my light purple right now. Actually, I'll be okay. I'm gonna make some of my teal color next. So teal is really easy to make, even with primary colors. And I'll always show you how to do that. So to make teal, it is blue with a little bit of yellow. So it's really just, it's blue with a tiny bit of a yellow tint to it. So it's like a bluish green, right? And then you add a little bit of white. So that's how you make teal, which is really fun. Now, if you mix teal and purple together, it will turn brownish, which you don't want. So I'm going to make enough of this teal so I don't have to make any more. So there's a darker teal. Grabbing a little bit of white will lighten it. So you can kind of figure out how dark, oh, grab a little bit more yellow, how dark or light you kind of want your teal to be. So always in these classes, take your time to mix colors that you like. But this is kind of a fun color. I think I need to make a little bit more. Sometimes it's worth making a little bit more paint so you don't run out when you need some. Because then you start sweating a little bit and you're like, I am not going to be able to mix that same color again, right? So sometimes we just slow down to make enough of it. And I'm just going to grab a little bit more white to lighten it again. I'm kind of going for like a not too dark, not too light kind of color. I don't know. I'm experimenting here. So that's a color, that's a teal, bluish teal color. I'm kind of wiping off some of the paint on my brush. You can see I'm kind of dabbing it around because I don't need a ton of paint on this brush right now, right? So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to use this teal in a couple ways. I'm going to focus on the background first, and then we're actually going to, I'll bring a little bit of this bluish teal into the ducks too, which would be really fun. But I'm going to bring in a little bit of this teal kind of up here. Maybe I'll just do a little bit of the dusting here off the top. And then I'm going to do a little bit of this teal kind of around the neck of this duck. Now, if you don't like what I'm doing, you don't have to do it. I love being the guinea pig in these classes and just trying new things. Some people like get really freaked out, but I'm just going to do some, I added water to my brush, and you can see I'm just doing some really kind of soft feathering. We're just bringing some of this teal on top of the purple. Really light hand, not a ton of paint on my brush. See that? Don't be afraid of it. And then I'm going to do a little bit of outlining around this side of the duck. Kind of back around the tail feather. And I'm going to use my brush. I got off most of the paint, and I'm just going to kind of fluff this in. I'm going to kind of move the wet paint around the brush, around the duck. And I'll do the same thing over here. You can kind of push in a little bit. It will move the paint around, so just caution. But see how I'm just kind of working it in? I'm using water as my friend here to break up the paint pigment. So it's just adding a little bit of extra shading, a little bit extra detail. I got a little bit of blue on my duck's head. It's okay. Don't worry. But you can scratch a little bit. If you don't have a lot of paint on your brush, you can kind of scratch in. Hear that noise? Maybe, maybe not. See, I'm kind of scratching that in. Okay. I'm just going to do a little bit of blue here. I'm just above the duck's butt. I'm doing a kind of a combination of a blue and a purple background. I may not do like this whole thing this way, but in this corner, I'm playing around with it a little bit. I'm going to bring in a little bit of this teal on the underside of this duck. And I'm just going to scratch this in and down. And I'm going to add in some lighter colors into this background to kind of make it, there's some like fun, like yellow kind of colors. So you can see I'm just adding in secondary colors to kind of make my duck kind of jump out a little bit. So you can do as much or as little of this as you want. You can play around with using a lot of water or no water at all. All good. I'm going to put a little bit of this teal in between the duck's legs. This is a watery teal, right? You can play with how much, like you could bring water up here onto your palette to play with how bold the pigment is. See that? See, I'm just bringing it in a little bit here and there. Maybe I'll come in on this side of the duck. It's really a visual thing. So it's about like figuring out how much you want to bring in and where you want to bring it in. So I'm kind of tailoring off from these blues as I work my way to the left. This is just a personal choice, right? If you have too much blue in one spot, go back to your purple and cover some of the blue up. We have that purple right here that we can go and grab. So just don't feel like you can't experiment because you're not going to be able to fix something. You can always fix something, and I'm always here to help you too. Okay. I am going to put a little bit of the blue and teals over on this side, not a ton. I might put a little bit here by the side of this duck's head, just so it matches. I might put a little bit here. You can always put your brush down. You can always smudge with your fingers. You can always take a corner of a paper towel and like wipe and smudge with a corner of a paper towel too. Don't worry if you get blue on your ducks. You can always put white on top and fix that. You wanted to try using a smaller brush, you could use a smaller brush. I am being intentional of just adding a little bit of teal in on the left side of my picture, just so it matches just a little bit, but excuse me, for this side, I'm keeping it fairly a little bit more heavy on the other side here. But just follow your eye. This is art at its finest of just being creative in the moment. Don't overthink it. Just do what feels right for you. My background's pretty dark. Yours may or may not be as dark. But these ducks are really starting to come to life here. They're starting to jump out, right? The bright contrast of the ducks. I might take a little bit of this blue and like bring it down here, just as like a little bit of an artsy touch. A little bit of an abstract touch here. You don't have to kind of put it down here. If I don't like it, I can always take it off. I can always smudge it in. You can always put purple over it, doesn't matter. Okay. There's something else I want you to consider. With a wet brush, with a little bit of this teal on it, we can use this to shade our ducks. So on like the left side of the neck, leaving a white buffer on either side, you can use this as the shading on the front of the duck's chest. Look at this, coming rounded down to the feet. Kind of smudge it with your fingers. See the shading that we're creating for our duck? The right side of this duck is going to stay white, but you can use this blue to shade the left side. See that? And you can do the same thing with this duck over here. So the right side of the bodies are going to stay lighter. Always keep a little bit of a white buffer. And you can always re-add that in if you need to. But this is just some fun shading using a blue color. And this can kind of come up near the face a little bit. See, I'm using just like there's water on my brush. We'll bring in a little bit of yellow too to help with this. But anywhere you want to play with, this is a little shading, you know, on the left side of the duck's bill. You can always switch to a smaller brush too here, which is really fun. So especially around the face. I'm using like a watery teal, as we discussed. Kind of around the face here. You can kind of just use your eye. Maybe it's a little darker here on the outside. I can always bring in white to kind of cover some of this up if I need to. Even make it a little purpley. It's really more so like we're gonna bring in more yellows and brighten it. So I want you to be I really just want you to be happy with your background right now, but I'm bringing in a little bit of the blues to kind of show you. Since we have that on our brush right now, I wanted to show you what that looks like. So if you wanted to do that with me, you could. I'm not going to do any more inside the ducks right now. I want us to be kind of focused on our backgrounds initially. So if you wanted to bring in a little bit of that blue, feel free. I'm going to kind of switch back. I'm not going to add anything else inside the ducks right now. I'm going to switch back to the background. Having like this nice, clear, crisp white line is really important for our ducks, especially around their face. Okay. So, you're playing with a little bit of that tealish in your background or another color. I am going to bring in a little bit of yellow. However, I don't want to bring in yellow until the background is totally dry. I am going to make a light yellow. We could bring it inside the ducks itself. And then by the time we're done by bringing in a little bit of the lighter yellow on the inside of the ducks, we can put it into the background if you wanted to bring it into the background. Okay. So I'm going to mix a light yellow color together. It is going to be a scoop of yellow and a little white and yellow mixed together. So I'm going to make that down here. And next to this blue, we're just going to put in a little bit of yellow. And you can make this as like textured. For me, you can make it a little more, if you want to make it a little more orangey, you can. You can kind of make it a beige color, which is just adding a little bit of the orange to the yellow. See, I just kind of toned it down a little bit. So, but I'm staying on where the blue is kind of touching the white. Just bringing in a little bit of the yellow. And you can bring in as much or as little as you wish. We're not going to go too fancy here. There's a lot of contrast in these bodies and the inspiration. Other areas you can add a little bit of this yellow is like on the inside of the beaks. You can add a little bit. For me, this is too light, so I'm going to kind of smudge it with my finger. And I'm going to add actually like a brighter yellow on the inside of the beaks. So if you wanted to add, I'm going to grab like a yellow. I'm going to put a little bit of like a brighter yellow on the inside of the beaks. Look at that. A little bit of like yellow on the inside of the beaks is really fun. So you can play with adding in a little bit of that. See how a little bit of lightness of the yellow on the beaks really just allowed those birds just to kind of come to life a little bit. And we'll do more of that. You can take, so I'm done with this light yellow. I'm kind of just dipping into my regular yellow at this point. And what you can do is, you can do with a small brush, you can add a little bit of highlighting here. So you can do a little bit of a line in the middle of each of the legs to create highlighting for the top of the leg. You want there to be orange on either side. So you kind of want to leave that padding. See that? And we'll keep this nice and easy. And then in between each of the webbed feet, you can do a little bit of yellow because it makes each of the three toes, right? Toes per se, to stand out a little bit. See that shading? The highlighting that we're adding with the light yellow is really allowing the orange to stand out. See the difference between these 2 feet? Easy peasy. It's just about doing things in layers, taking your time. Okay. So this is just yellow paint. Again, a line in its most simple form, a line down the middle of the leg, leaving the dark orange on the left and the right side, using a smaller brush if you need it. Get fancy and kind of blend it in a little bit if you wanted to, but you can do the other foot as you wish. See that? And then just do a 1, 2, 3, just using the tip of your brush. If you want to get a little fancy here, you could create a darker orange. So we were using yellow to kind of create highlighted or lighter areas. If you wanted to create a darker orange by using just a little bit of extra red in the orange, you can, again, on the right side of each leg, you can do a little bit of a darker outline. So a darker outline on the right side of each leg. This is adding that darker color to create shading. So you can use this anywhere you want to create shading. So maybe it's the top of the webbed foot. Maybe it's where those little ducks have those like little toenails that kind of like hook out. Or may or not I may or may not have owned ducks in the past. Look at these little but you can see what a little contrast is, right? You can decide how much or how little you want to add. In the inspiration, there's actually some much darker contrast. So you could, I'll show you what a little bit of like red looks like. You could actually use red for this part. So that's a little bit of red. Red really stands out. So you could do your shading with a little bit of like a red contrast. And you can kind of blend the red in with a little bit of water on your brush. You obviously want to kind of hold, want to make sure the lighter yellows don't go away, but you can kind of add some of the yellows back. So this is where artists can they really spend a lot of time playing with the shading for things like very like significant artists. They spend time playing with the shading and how these darker and lighter colors kind of blend in together. This is where we could all spend hours just like playing around, right? But it's always okay that you can always come back in and add more. The red really stands out, so I'm just showing you what that looks like. If you don't like the red, guess what? Let it dry, go and paint the orange on top of it. Come back in and add the yellow, right? Add in more orange and yellow where you see fit. If your colors start to get mucky, just let them dry. Just stop painting and let them all dry, okay? But you really want the light and dark contrast. So I'm just coming in with a little bit of a wet tip on my brush and just blending kind of one color to another while holding on to that contrast. I want the contrast between the yellows and the reds and the oranges for those to really just jump out. I might even come back in and add a little bit more yellow to the feet, but you can at least see where we're going there. Okay. All right. And we may add a little bit of darker contrast at the very end as well, which will be fun. Another area you can consider adding in some shading besides the feet is around the beaks. So the bottom lower part of the bill is like a darker orange. So think of like a lip, an under lip. So you can kind of outline like the bottom side, kind of like if you're doing lipstick on yourself, it's like doing your bottom lip only. See that? See how I had it just a little bit of like a darker color on the underside of this beak. Added a little shading there. So you can decide how much or how little of that you may want to add, but I'm just going to do a little bit of that. You can play with the blending. You can play with how much or how little you add here. I'm kind of playing with blending up my finger a little bit. And just how we played with the lighter and the darker colors for the feet, you could do the same thing with the beaks. So the beaks could even have the yellow, right, again, or you could do even a little bit of a lighter yellow, maybe on, look at this, on the right side of these beaks. You could do a little bit of a lighter yellow. And you can use your finger to smudge. This is a little bit level of a 2, but you can see the difference by adding just a little bit of a lighter color, what that looks like. And for me, this beak over here is a little wide, so I can come in still with my white and reshape my beak if I need to. I'm not worried about that. And once you're happy with your beaks, you can put in kind of 2 little nostrils. You could use a dark purple, you could use like a gray color, you could use black. There are 2 little nostrils up here on the beak. This is where the ducks breathe. So you could just 2 little lines. But you can see the shading that the blue and the yellows have added to these ducks. You can see the, oops, you can see the contrast that we did in the feet and that we did on the beaks itself. So I'm going to come in with just a little bit more yellow on the feet, just for a little bit of extra brightness. Just a little bit more. You can decide where you really want things to stand out and where you want things to be a little more subtle. Those are the choices that you get to make, okay? And you can always kind of keep tweaking and making changes too. It's no big deal. Okay, so we worked a little bit on the beaks and we added a little bit of the orange detail for the legs and the body and a little bit of yellow on the bodies. I want you to, we're gonna just finish up the background in any way that you want. You may be happy with the background. You may want to do something else. I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow, lighter yellow. They have it in the inspiration. It's really pretty. It kind of matches everything on the inside. I'm using this lighter yellow that I've created here. I might make a little bit more of it. I'm not going to use a ton of paint on my brush because I'm going to make this into a little bit of a water wash. A little bit of water on my brush. Again, I'm kind of trying to be controlled with how much I add and where. But for me, the lightness around that I'm putting in this yellow is really kind of in between. So this might be scary. If you don't want to do this, you don't have to. I'm experimenting because that's why we're here. So I'm adding in a little bit of this light yellow. I'm going to clean my brush off and I'm going to kind of work it in a little bit. So I'm kind of feathering it in here and there. So I cleaned off a lot of the paint and I'm just kind of feathering this in into different spaces. So it's just to kind of create some highlighted areas. I'm going to bring this around kind of the top of the duck's head over here. I'm just going to grab a little bit and kind of bring it around this duck's head. Kind of like how I brought teal in around the other duck. I'm going to bring in this lighter color here. And I'm just with a little water, I'm just going to kind of feather this in with a really light hand. And kind of sweeping up a little bit. See how it just brightened the area around the duck, kind of like the duck's glowing a little bit. Soft, gentle, kind of feather-like brush strokes. It's really just starting to stand out against the other contrasting areas. Very little paint on my brush. It's a little bit wet, but it created a little bit of lightness. I like where this is going. So I'm just kind of dabbing my brush. I have a little bit of a water wash down here. I kind of dab my brush in it a little bit. I'm going to bring in some of this lightness down here between these two ducks. See that? And I'm leaving a little bit of a dark gap to really make the duck stand out. See how there's like a purple gap right here next to the duck? It's really allowing that duck to jump out. I'm going to use white paint to really round out this duck right here. And I'll put a little bit of this yellow over here, just around the side of the duck's head to add a little bit of a glow. You can do an up, down kind of brush stroke. Again, this is like a dusting of lighter color. It's like a dusting of a glow. I'm going around my duck's head. For me, this lightness is really kind of bringing everything together. And I'll show you what my brush looks like again. A little bit of water, a little bit of paint. You don't need a lot of paint on this brush, so keep that in mind. I'm going to bring in a little bit more contrast over here on this side of the duck. This is where you're using a little bit of your mindfulness painting principles along the way of just not doing too much, just doing just enough for you. Go and get your brush a little wet, kind of wipe off some of the water and just slowly kind of brush this in and just see what happens. Don't overdo it. When you feel like you're happy, just stop. That's the most important thing. You can always, with a wet paper towel, you could do some like dabbing for some texture. This, if you wanted to. Like it gave me some funky texture right there. I don't like that, so I'm just gonna smudge. It actually just wiped a lot of that off, which is fine. I cannot go back in and fix it, but you can see what I'm doing here, right? So figure out where you might want to bring in some of that lighter detail. You might want to bring in some of this golden color, like into your birds a little bit. So like in here, again, we know we want the right side of our ducks to be white, but doesn't mean you can't bring in other lighter colors to kind of help the colors change and fluctuate. So this is kind of like a beigeish color that I'm using just to kind of fill in the duck a little bit. Just kind of seeing what happens. So you can kind of just create a little bit of a third trifecta. I do want to bring in a little bit like of an orangey yellow into the duck. I just want to see what it looks like. So you may have your own ideas as you're painting here. So just incorporate your own ideas as you wish. And I'll do the same just to kind of show you what it's like to just be open-minded to kind of bringing in things. And there is a little bit more contrast. There is a lot more contrast actually on like the inside here. So you can do as much or as little as you wish. I'm just gonna kind of be playful. I can come in with white and kind of create layers and buffers, but we're getting pretty close here. And if you wanted to like come in with your eraser, with your pencil, so for me, I got lots of pencil marks. I'm happy with my duck's eyes for right now. I'm also happy with my background. So finish your background and then just kind of start moving your way back inside of your duck. So my eyes are dry. Just gonna erase some pencil marks. Don't use your pencil anywhere that might be wet. Luckily, you can use your pencil comes right off, which is really quite nice. Especially if you have even paint right next to it. Pencil will still come off. It's so nice. But just make sure that paint is dry before you come in your pencil. But I really love how these ducks are coming out. Anytime you want to come in with your white for like any like starting to do refinements for your ducks, you also can use like a gray color too. I'm just gonna come in with white. I have a little bit of black right here, so I might make it a little gray, but I'm gonna come in like around my eye to like make sure that the duck's head is like nice and solid from a shaping perspective, right? If you want to reshape any of your eyes, you can reshape your eyes with a little bit of light, right? So these are all the things that you can kind of make adjustments on. If you got a little orange, if you want to reshape your duck bill, remember how my duck bill was a little too wide? Sometimes just doing like a white border around your duck bill will just kind of help you reshape it. Got a little blue on his head. Paint some white over the blue, right? That's all those little things for you to kind of come in and clean it up. This is a really satisfying part, especially if you're letting some other areas dry, right? As an artist, it's okay to kind of bounce around. Coming in with a little bit of white to do cleanup edges is good. And then you can, if you wanted to bring in more shading anywhere you could. So, you know, ducks are not white. They're like lots of colors, obviously. There's a lot of different types of ducks. But ducks, you know, have grays in them and they have lots of different colors and shades. So We're keeping it pretty simple today with regards to bringing in some shaded colors. I will bring in a little bit of wing detail before we wrap up, but just go in with a little bit of white and kind of clean up the edges around the inside. I'm just kind of following my way around. You do not have to paint the entire duck white, not necessary. You can also come in here, you can, if you need to if you want to blend some colors, you can kind of bring in some teals. You especially around like the top side of the wings, like if you wanted to add some like additional texture, especially with the white on, it kind of helps blend it all in. So for me, I was just being a little playful of like adding in a little bit of extra here. But this is you, like you can play with how you want these colors to kind of like come in and blend. You can see I'm just coming in with a little bit of white and teal just to kind of like soften this whole edging in. It's kind of like white and teal, kind of softening the original teal that I had here. See how it just blended all together a little bit more? These are just the refinements that you can make. I'll do the same thing on the inside of this duck, on the left side of that duck too. Use your finger to blend. So this is where you're just kind of walk around where you have shading on the inside of your duck. Again, I'm being intentional of having the right side of each duck be lighter and the other side being a little darker. And a little water on your brush can kind of help you with any transition of color. So just keep that in mind. If you're feathering kind of one color into another, just water can help you if you need it. You can use your finger to blend. You can do the same thing with oranges, like if you want to feather in like oranges with your white or yellows, totally fine. Just keep in mind, mixing yellows and oranges will give you greens versus blues, but that's fine, right? It's okay if colors start to blend a little bit. You can make some of those choices. But just I'm kind of going back and forth. I'm using my white to kind of like trim my edges of my ducks, but I'm also kind of mixing like a lighter teal along the way and kind of mixing it so it just better blends into some of these colors. So go at your own speed here. These are all the final touches for our picture today. But I hope you're enjoying today's class. This was so much fun. I absolutely love the way my ducks came out. There are a few other bits of shading that I'll share with you before I wrap up too. So we're not quite done yet. There's some really dark contrasting shading that is happening. I'll probably use a dark purple, but let's do the inside of these ducks first, like that nice white trim. And then any blending you want to do with the oranges, any blending you want to do with the teals or the blues. So focus on that for the next 5 minutes. And then I'll show you how to do the dark purple for darker accents if you wish. For me, I'm just kind of softening and helping with the blend from one color to another. And I'm using kind of a smaller size brush. So I'm just kind of following my gut here. We could all easily spend hours kind of blending and playing with all these colors, and you certainly can, right? This class is, and this tutorial and this opportunity is for you to kind of take it as you see fit. So always just, follow your intuition on what you want to do in these classes and spend as much or as little time as you wish. Bring in a little bit of orange on the underside of this belly. Okay. All right. So if anyone wants to do any darker contrast, I'll show you one more trick. So I'm using a brush that has a nice fine tip on it. I'm going to use a darker purple. So you have purples right here. This is kind of like a mauve. This is a nice violet color. I'll put it on my hand so you can see it. Okay, this color will stand out against these ducks. Like it doesn't seem that dark, but it's dark enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this darker color and I'm going to outline the left side of this duck with a thin brush stroke. See the contrast that just gave that side of the duck? Optional. I'm going to do it to be the guinea pig so you can see what it looks like. So just highlighted right there. Okay. On the outside of the feet, I'm going to do a little bit of this dark purple contrast. See that dark purple contrast down here? I could even go darker if I wanted to. I'm going to go a little darker. Again, on my hand, that's the color. It's okay to get paint on your hands. On the outside of the foot. On the inside of the webbing. Look at this. You can use this to create the webbing. See, I'm shaping the webbing down here with just this purple, dark purple. Big difference. Okay. You could put a little bit of this on the underside. I'm not going to put a ton. I might even, okay, you could put a little bit on the left side of the other leg. See the contrast it's creating there? You can use a little bit of water. See, I'm creating a little bit of a water wash. Just softens the paint pigment just a little bit. You can use this dark purple to kind of shape the webbing of the feet if you wish. So you can see the difference from this duck up here with this shading. I'm keeping this side of the belly lighter, and I can even put a lighter color over here. So you don't need to do that there, but I can take this pigment and on the inside of this duck, on the left side, I can put that dark purple up here. Just on the underside of his neck, so on his body, really. So just did a little bit of a line. You could blend in this a little bit if you wanted to have it more blended versus a line. Just put a little bit of water. Look at this, and just use your finger. Stay out of your duck, but just do it on the outside. You can see I just did a little bit here. I don't want to come out too much. I got to blend this up and in now here a little bit, but you see what I'm getting at. Okay, see the shading I just created on that side of the duck? That's what you can do. You can do that anywhere you want. So this is where you can add some optional shading on the outside of your ducks if you wish. Just makes them jump out a little bit more. I'm gonna do the same kind of purple outlining on the feet on this guy over here. So they look the same. So it's basically it's the left side, and you can do it all the way down the left side of this duck's body here, all the way down on the outside of the foot. You can use water. You don't have to use water. You could just use pure paint. You can choose. Play with how dark or how light it is. On the underside of the feet, right? You can decide how much contrast is on the underside of the feet. Use your finger and smudge a little bit. Have some fun here. on the left side of the legs. See that? And a little bit maybe on the underside of the body, just a little bit. You don't have to have a clear line down here. You can definitely kind of blend it in with your finger. And I could create a little bit of a transition over here with a little more water. You can kind of soften it a little bit here. Kind of play with what the underside of the body looks like. And you can always come in with a little bit of white if you need to do a touch up here or there. And then if you wanted to do like the back side of this guy's butt, you could do a little bit of a dark contrast over here. I'm not going to do too much, but you kind of get where we're going. All right, so this is where you're going to make any final touches to your ducks. I hope you all loved tonight's class. It was a lot of fun. I cannot wait to see your artwork. If you are a part of our Patreon community, I want to thank you for being a part of it. These classes would not be able to exist without your contributions and your support. My mission is to continue to offer affordable painting classes for everyone, keeping the rates nice and low. But I would not be able to be here without your support. So thank you so much. And it's great to have you here and for you to practice your creativity and continue to make time for yourself, as always. I encourage you to download the Patreon app to your cell phone if you haven't already. There's no kicks or bonuses for me. It's really a great place for you to post your paintings. I would love to see your artwork after today's class. You're welcome to email me as well. My email is Megan, MEAGAN, @paintandsipvt.com. But I encourage you to download the Patreon app. There's a chat room in there where we share our artwork. You also get to you get to know other people, which is really fun as well. But feel free to continue painting as long as you wish here. I might look around and just do like a little bit of like kind of yellow feather like wing detail here. I don't know. This is where you art and you create as long as you wish. I might add like a little bit of light yellow, very light, just kind of over here on by the bum a little bit. Again, the right side of these birds are going to stay nice and light. So you can bring in white paint here if you wish. You can add in texture if you wish. This is you. You do as much or as little as you wish here for your final touches. You can always put your brush down and kind of come back to it at a later date, but I'm really glad you joined us. I hope you loved today's inspiration. You can always add more lightness to the background. You can always kind of tweak your ducks, but I hope you had a nice time and I look forward to seeing your artwork. Thanks again. Talk to you soon.